Welcome to another brilliant episode with me, Milo Alexander, and the best data scientist this side of Pluto, Jafaar Almusaad. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Fantastic. Today's episode is going to be about software development and big business. What is software development?
Software development is a discipline where business problems, scientific problems, social problems are analyzed and then broken down into pieces that can be converted into a computer code. And that code can be executed by computers, and effectively then you have a process that's been automated by computers.
How is it applicable to big business or business in general?
I think literally every big business in the world nowadays is completely reliant on some kind of software. It could be to automate their processes, it could be for certain functionalities, or it could be for literally everything. Think of companies like Google, for instance, one of the largest companies in the world, and they are all software-based company. They don't just sell software, but they operate by software. People do the supporting roles, but the main tasks are actually accomplished in the software that they developed internally.
Would you say software outweighs hardware?
In terms of importance, yes, I believe that's the case. This wasn't the case maybe 20 or 30 years ago, because hardware was very limiting at the time. So your software would need to be restricted to what the hardware is capable of. But now, because hardware has become more powerful and the cost of the hardware has dropped significantly, now it's becoming more feasible to build massive data centers, and the software have become very complex, and now you can effectively build a massive supercomputer on top of maybe thousands of commodity hardware.
What problems do developers face when working with businesses?
I think the jargon is the main problem. Business people speak in business terms. Most software developers come from data science. These people, they don't speak the same language. That's causing a huge issue because a software developer could misunderstand the business problem, develop a solution, a brilliant solution that does not answer the right question. And that's only found out at a late stage in the project, in the software development project, and that can cause all kind of issues, problems.
What problems do businesses face when working with software developers?
Just as I pointed out, is the jargon, the language. There is no common way to communicate, and I think it's a responsibility of the developer to actually, because who is the client, who is the supplier in this case? The supplier is the software developer. The client is a business, so it is the responsibility of the supplier to understand the jargon of the clients and not try to force the client to speak in a language that's convenient to the supplier. So I think software developers need to understand, need to learn about business problems, need to get their hands dirty, get involved, and I think this would really solve a lot of problems.
What is your approach to business problems and how do you bring about solutions?
I place a huge priority on validation. I spend quite significant of time communicating with my clients, understanding their problems. Sometimes I need to visit their place, visit their plant, visit their offices, see how they actually work, and that helped me build an understanding of the problems they're having. And normally, as a developer, I get involved with senior managers in the companies, and senior managers don't seem to understand the operational problems they are having in their own business. So it always makes sense to actually speak to the other people in the company, people who are doing the day-to-day job, to understand the real problems. And then once that is done, then I can explain the problem in my own terms for them to actually validate and to tell me, yes, you get it right, or no, you get it wrong. And once all of that is clear, then I can progress to the next phase where I can develop a prototype. Typically, I develop a prototype just to prove the concept, and once the concept is actually proven, then it is the time to develop a new software based on the prototype, of course, but not the prototype itself. The prototype could be done in Visual Basic, for example, but the final software could be developed in R or in C or whatever appropriate programming language.
What kinds of problems have you faced working with developers, and how do you bring about solutions?
I think developers developed a habit of expecting someone else to check their work. I think that's a deficiency, and it's actually contributing to the negative impression, negative image we got as software developers. The idea is, let's develop it now, let's fix it later. And I think that might work fine for simple websites, but when you develop a software that will automate some processes, you've got to make sure that it is done correctly and it can accommodate all the circumstances. So in most cases, there may be a handful of expected circumstances, but hundreds of unexpected circumstances. These need to be dealt with in the software. Most software developers pay no attention to this, unfortunately. So the software works and everything is brilliant, but the world is not perfect. When simple things go wrong, the software just fails completely. And I think there is a lot to be improved in this regard.
So do you mean that the developers should take into consideration the different variables that might happen and put things in place so that the business owners don't have major problems? Because if business owners then have major problems, a slight problem or iteration in their business dealings, this can impact on their productivity and revenue generating schemes. Is that what you mean?
Yes, precisely. And in addition, software developers need to be proactive to understand the entirety of the problem at hand and the circumstances and the environment and accommodate all of that. That's not something the business owners would be knowledgeable about to explain, because they are not developers. After all, they don't know how software works. If they were, they wouldn't hire developers, right? They would do it themselves. So developers expect someone to tell them exactly what they should be doing, and what I think is they need to have a more broader understanding of the business problem in hand and the environment.
What are your final thoughts on this topic?
I don't see much improvement on the issues we just described, so that will continue to be the case for a while. Unfortunately, there's more and more reliance on software now, not just big businesses, even now medium and small businesses. Sometimes you can see a lot of startup companies that are entirely based on software. Could it be machine learning, or it could be just conventional software? So this software has to be perfect from day one. Otherwise, especially for startup company, the company will run out of business if their software fails and if their business operations just stalled. As for big businesses, I think it's less of an issue because they can afford to hire high quality developers, and I think in some cases the business culture might be different. So this is fine as long as the developers are employees hired by the same company, operate within the same quality standards in that company. This might be a bigger issue when the software development is outsourced or offshored to certain part of the world where, quality is not always a priority.
If there's a brain drain where a lot more companies, small, medium, whatever have you, if they're focusing more on software, that then means if the developers are not proactive of learning new techniques and mastering their field, after a while, the companies will plateau in a certain amount of expertise they have. And if that's the level, the bar is set low. So the next group of developers that come in, the bar will be set even lower. So what you have is over time a reduction in productivity, whereas the software has to be perfect straight away. And that will cause a lot of problems further down the line, because if you have bigger problems and your data scientists or your developers can't handle it because of the how could I put it, the learning curve, that means that the business world will suffer.
Precisely. So in this case, instead of the company moving forward, they will be busy fighting fires in every corner. they will slow down. There will be no improvement, no growth. So it's always critical to get the software correct from the first time. So there's no software that can be 100% bug free. That's understandable. But the software should be good enough, should be resilient, flexible to change without causing too much trouble. So after all, it should not be limiting. It should not be a limiting factor to the business. It should help the business grow and not slow it down.